What is the creepiest historical fact? I live in a city named Halifax in the province of Nova Scotia, Canada. During the potato famine in Ireland, thousands of immigrants would land here first before heading on to other parts of Canada. Many did not survive the crossing, so mass graves were dug. One day workers who had been loading bodies into these graves went to lunch and upon their return, found one person had crawled out. Male mummies are found to better preserved because female bodies were not sent for embalming right after their death for the fear of necrophilia. In WW1 there was a Hungarian man that said he was stocking up on oil and was sent off to war. His townspeople needed it and opened up the cans to find several dead women in there. Apparently he also tried to suck their blood and he was never seen again. In the past, people used mummies for everything from medicines to colors to paint with. There was even a tonic to drink that had ground up mummies as part of the ingredients. As for painting, the color was called mummy brown. It became in such high demand that, in some instances, the remains of executed criminals were mummified and used to satiate the demand of artists. Cleopatra was the product of 4 consecutive generations of brother-sister marriages. The Leather Man was an individual who would walk the same 360-mile route between the Hudson and Connecticut rivers approximately every 30 days for 30 years. He was named Leather Man because of the hand-sewn leather clothes he wore and the fact that he never spoke to anyone other than shopkeepers for supplies and would never divulge anything about his past. He is believed to be French or Quebecois because a French Bible was found on him when he died. When his grave was recently exhumed to test his DNA, no remains were found. Zhang Shanzhong, also known as Yellow Tiger, was the leader of a 17th-century peasant revolt which conquered the Chinese province of Sichuan in the end days of the Ming dynasty. There he lived the life of a warlord, in constant battle, and eventually descended into madness and barbarism wherein he turned upon his own people in merciless slaughter. He would pile the heads, hands, ears and noses of those he had killed, so as to better keep count of his murders. In Chengdu, there was erected a stele to commemorate his murders. It has come to be known as the 7-Kill Stele, and read, "Heaven brings forth innumerable things to nurture man. Man has nothing good with which to recompense heaven." Sir Hugh Despenser the Younger was punished for backing the wrong nobles in a power struggle, with execution by torture while tied near the top of a ladder leaning against an urban building. While a crowd of onlookers watched, the torturer was a surgeon who had to stand near the top of an adjacent ladder while surgically cutting out Sir Hugh's liver. There's an actual Gauguin painting of this called The Execution of Sir Hugh Despenser the Younger. You can't make this shit up. 3 sailors survived the sinking of the USS West Virginia at Pearl Harbor, only to die 16 days later, due to the lack of air. The Navy knew they were there, but couldn't get to them. Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique was written by him for the woman he was relentlessly stalking and harassing. His idea was to basically reveal to her that he had written it for her after she attended the performance, which he had pressured her into attending. Somehow, that shit worked. And I believe they married. Don't believe the marriage lasted. They literally did not speak the same language. During Pope Gregory IX's term, he declared that cats were associated with devil worship, which led to their massacre. The Little Albert Experiment. one which aimed to find if fear was ingrained in our brains or taught by parents. A baby was shown various things: puppies, rabbits, rats, masks, burning newspapers, etc. Being a child, he had no reaction to any of them. Following this, he began presenting soft, fluffy things to the child while slamming a gong with a hammer from behind a curtain to scare the child. The child developed a phobia of white, fluffy things. The experiment ended because this child he was kidnapping from the daycare on his campus had moved away with his mother. Chances are little Albert is still alive and psychologically fucked as a result of this experiment. The Raft of the Medusa. In 1816, France sent a ship called the Medusa to go reclaim the French African colony of Senegal. The captain was appointed based on politics rather than merit. Captain Dumbfuck ended up running the ship onto a sandbar and refused to dump the cannons in order to make the ship light enough to get back into sea. The giant raft they built to hold the ship's cargo was eventually used to float the 147 people who couldn't fit onto the lifeboats. The idea was that the lifeboats could tow the raft to shore. The lifeboat folks, including Captain Dumbfuck and the governor, decided to cut off the raft and leave everyone for dead while they sailed to land. After 2 weeks, there were only 15 men left alive on the raft, and boy, did they have a story to tell. Vlad III, better known as Vlad the Impaler. It's said that when he impales the Ottomans, he'd use a stick with a dull tip to impale them from the anus through the mouth straight up. And from what I've heard, he used sticks that has dull tips because it would push the organs aside rather than stabbing through. So they won't just die right away, but they would have to suffer painfully. I can't imagine being a soldier marching through a forest of my comrades moaning in pain, knowing that if I make one mistake, I would end up with them suffering their fate. I find the killing fields of Cambodia to be very disturbing. Pol Pot murdered a huge percentage of his country through starvation and of course execution. There's lots of info on this if you are interested. The Hittite law book has a disturbingly long list of sex crimes. Some highlights include over 10 different kinds of bestiality with punishment depending on the kind of animal and who topped, and necrophilia, which was 100% legal. Not really creepy, more like gross. One of the King Loius' servants said that he had so much lice that when he would eat, clumps of lice would just fall onto his food. Apparently washing your head was unhygienic. So there's a legend my grandfather would read to us as children about a guy called Sawney Bean. I assumed it was bollocks. But turns out there is likely some truth in it. Sawney was the head of a clan in Scotland in the 16th century. Essentially he and his wife Agnes had 6 daughters, 8 sons, then a load of grandkids who were the product of incest anyway. Lacking the inclination to work, Sawney and his family began raiding local villages and travelers for money and supplies. The clan would bring the bodies back to the cave where they kill, dismember and eat them. They pickled the leftovers and put them into storage. The locals noticed many people going missing at night, and would frequently search for the culprits. They reputedly even found the cave where the Beans lived but didn't think it was inhabitable. The story goes that innocent people were lynched for the murders. Over the years the locals looked for Sawney's clan. They were eventually caught when they tried to ambush a newly married couple traveling down a road. They caught and murdered the wife, but the husband managed to fight them off with his sword and pistol before being saved by the wedding party who were traveling on the same road. The king James VI probably ordered a posse to be formed of 400 men, and with the assistance of bloodhounds they found the cave. Apparently they found body parts hanging from the walls, barrels filled with pickled organs, jewelry from thousands of victims. They say Sawney was taken first to Edinburgh, then Glasgow, where he was killed without trial, as he was deemed subhuman. Sawney and his fellow men had their genitalia cut off and thrown into the fires, their hands and feet severed, and were allowed to bleed to death, with Sawney shouting his dying words, "It isn't over. It will never be over." After watching the men die, Agnes, her fellow women, and the children were tied to stakes and burned alive. It is claimed they may have killed up to 5,000 people, but with record-keeping being fairly poor back then, and the clandestine way the clan operated, it's hard to know. Either way, lovely legend to tell to a child, and possibly based in truth. August 6, year 1915. Osovi Fortress. After poisonous bombardment from Germans, around 500 of Russians charged once again with the last strength they had. This event was called Attack of the Dead Men. Germans didn't expected them to reincarnate and charge at them. Just imagine some Russian charging at you, trying to shoot while his body slowly rots. One of the creepiest events I tell students in my Western Civilizations class is the ecclesiastical trial of Pope Formosus around 875 AD. This event was called the Synodus Horrenda, also known as the Cadaver Synod. Formosus had been dead for 7 months, but the new pope, Pope Stephen VI, found it necessary to exhume Formosus' body and bring it to the papal court to answer for accusations of perjury and exceeding the papacy illegally. Granted, the Catholic Church has gone through many strange things over the course of its history. However, this event always gets a reaction, especially when the Jean-Paul Laurens painting is shown. The assassin of U.S. President James Garfield, Charles J. Guiteau, had a long history of priapism and phimosis. This resulted in chronic pain because his foreskin was so tight that it would not and could not retract normally. A group of doctors claim the severe pain led to a form of insanity that led him to kill the president. At Guiteau's autopsy, he was found to also have an advanced case of balanitis and balanopostitis with a significant accumulation of smegma. Go figure. A dirty dick killed a president. The first emperor of China, Shi Huangdi, wanted to live forever, so he was looking for the elixir of immortality. His doctors were given a choice: find it or die. Anyhow, soon he discovered a liquid that is considered to be it, thus he drank it daily, not knowing his magical liquid was actually mercury, and it was slowly poisoning him. He died of mercury poisoning. When some scientist was studying death, he asked a man who was about to be executed via guillotine to blink for as long as he could after his head was chopped off, and he ended up blinking for 30 seconds. Probably not the creepiest but still disturbing. Japanese warriors during many battles used to behead enemy generals, higher-ups, and present it to their lord general at dinner as an entertainment after winning the battle. Late to the party. But Ctrl+F doesn't show it yet. So let's add this to the list. In the early 1990s, the city of Herxheim, a small community in the very west of Middle Germany, built a new industrial park or something like that. They found the remains of a Neolithic village that used to house between 80 and 100 people and was dated to about 5.000 BC. As they dug further, They began finding graves nearby. That